Morning, morning. Welcome. Tuesday morning. Yeah, the 18th of May. Time has disappeared on us. We are talking MVP this morning, but MVP with a twist, Lee. So you've twisted MVP. So what have you twisted it into?
Well, I don't know if it's a twist. It's just that for me it's a point of curiosity and wanting to explore and investigate this concept. I think it's become it's almost, and I know Edward is we mustn't use acronyms, so minimum viable product. So just hats off to you, Edward, trying to keep to that. So minimum viable product, it's become such almost a cliche, and we talk about it in business terms, but I wonder whether we actually know what it is. And I thought to dig down a little bit deeper into, so what is viable? So at what point is the product acceptable enough to the marketplace that we're not testing something that is below par? So we want to have enough quality in that product that says it's viable. This is something that we are proving our value to you by offering you this product. And then what is minimum? So it's not so refined that we can't tweak it, we can't improve it, we can't develop it further. And in actual fact, and this is what has been proven with minimum viable product, is that your first adopters, your early adopters, actually want to give feedback. They're saying, we will share this, the success of your product with you, and they become loyal to you and your brand because they've given feedback, they've contributed, and they've seen that as something that is adding value. And it's such an interesting thing about human beings, that we don't need to be paid to give that feedback. We see that as a wonderful contribution. I think of everybody that spends time adding information into Wikipedia, into all these open source type softwares and so on. People want to share their information, their feedback, even reviews. For me, it takes a time we went to a fish and chip shop in Hermanus, and the last thing they say as we're leaving is, please write a review. Well, I'm thinking, I've paid for my food. What else do you want? So, but quite honestly, how did I choose that fish and chip shop out of the 5 other fish and chip shops in Hermanus? I went to the reviews page. So you've got to give to get. So this is interesting, this whole thing of participating with your potential clients to create something that there is an energy around. And that means that you have to be humble enough and discerning enough to take that feedback, because not all of it is relevant, not all of it is helpful, but there may be something that is going to trigger something for you that says, I need to do this better, or this would work better. And I just want to leave with 2 examples. I've interviewed recently 2 amazing entrepreneurs. The one is a woman who is farming strawberries and some other kind of fruit. I don't know all the different kinds of fruit, in Lesotho. And she makes cordials out of those fruit. And the second is also a woman farmer, and she is growing cassava and is making gluten-free flour out of that cassava. So both of them are not just farming a product, but creating a product from it. So they're in the business of agri-processing, and therefore have needed to create a minimum viable product to test with the marketplace. And it's a very, very physical taste test. It's, you know, what is the texture? What is it sweet enough? Is it, how does it mix with the cordial? How does it mix with water? How does it mix with alcohol? How long does it get stored? And so there's these very tangible things. The same with cassava. The flour was, you know, how does it, you know, what kind of cakes does it make? What kind of bread does it make? What texture is it? And so all of these things it's just helpful to have something so physical that reminds you that there needs to be a taste test in the market. So that's me.
Thanks, Lee. You started to make me hungry there. Getting all the taste buds going for the taste test. So yeah, it's interesting where you want to go with that. Just a note, you spoke about the reviews, and I was chatting to my daughter the other day, and she was saying, you know, the Gen Z generation, apparently they don't buy anything without going through reviews, going through, you know, the YouTube videos, checking the thing out. They'll go through endless versions of reviews and things before they make a decision to actually spend their money on something. So it's a very interesting thing, this online review. So anyway, Tabiso, what's your MVP?
Well, I have to go back to Steve Jobs for this, you know. In 1976, Apple released their first computer. It was just a board, you know, hardware. And to make this happen was, you know, Steve's partner actually sold his expensive calculator, and Steve Jobs actually sold his VW car, you know. There was this shop that actually wanted like 50 units. So the guys actually worked to actually produce those units, you know, and the guy actually liked it, you know, and that's where like Apple started, you know, but they were just bored. They were just like hardware, but the minimum viable product was okay. But, you know, something needed to, Steve wanted to create a whole computer, you know, in terms of monitor, keyboards, and everything, you know. So that was their next product, and their next product would be Apple II. But to create this complete computer needed, you know, like capital, you know. So they formed what we call, you know, Mastermind Alliance with a guy named Mike Markler, you know. Now, a mastermind alliance is like an understanding between like two people or even more, you know, to share, you know, a common goal. You know, these two people or entities, like we are together to actually solve a common goal, you know. And Mike Merkley actually invested, and for his investment, he got like ownership share in an Apple. And of course, the guys at Apple got the money to actually build the computers, you know. They were a success, you know. Apple II was like so awesome, you know. This is important because without like a mastermind alliance, nothing can really happen, you know. This term mastermind alliance was actually coined by Napoleon Hill, you know. And a mastermind alliance is so important because it is difficult to stay on top. And when you have a great product, you know, like the guys at Apple had with the Apple II, there will be imitators, you know, that will be there to actually take the market share, you know. So when you have a mastermind alliance, you have backing, you know, you have knowledge, you have funding, so you can create competitive advantage, you know. And that's what the guys at Apple did, you know. I love Steve because he's very intelligent. He changed the whole business model of Apple, you know. He actually changed Apple from this open system and he actually closed it, you know. And he used vertical integration. Now, what vertical integration is that, you know, when a company actually owns all of its operations, you know, from manufacturing to actually distributing, you know. And, you know, Apple has its own operating system. It has Apple stores, it has iTunes. It is just integrated, you know, it is just one, it is connected. When the guys at Apple said, think different, they really meant it, you know, because Apple is a standalone. They're like one company, you know, they're like alone, you know. Um, the guys, I actually saw in the newspaper that some magazine, no, not magazine, some company named Apple Games, no, Epic Games, I think, they're actually suing Apple for like taking a huge commission for their games, you know. But that was exactly what Steve Jobs wanted, you know, to actually create this monopoly because, you know, Apple is so integrated, you know. That was the genius of that thinking from Steve Jobs, you know, to actually establish that, you know, to make sure that once the customer has an Apple product, he can never go anywhere. And when we have that, we control the whole customer experience. We keep the customer in, we control everything. So it was absolutely genius, you know. You need a mastermind alliance because it helps you, um, you know, accomplish such things, you know. And you see people like, for example, my favorite artist, Kanye West. Kanye West also needed a mentorship, like a mastermind alliance, sorry. And the guys, Jay-Z, Damon Dash, and hip hop, they actually gave him that platform, you know. They actually advised Kanye. They actually provided him with funding. And through that, Kanye was actually able to release his music, you know, because the minimum viable product that he had, the music, you know, he was a producer for the guys. He created music for other people. He was already good enough, you know, but with backing and, you know, knowledge, he was able to do more, you know. I think that when you have a minimum viable product, the next big thing is a mastermind alliance. You have to have people who are good in a certain field who can assist, not maybe just in monetary terms, you know, but in the form of mentorships or something that is, you know, substantial that can actually assist you. So a mastermind alliance is everything, you know. And I think I'll just leave it there. After the minimum viable product, you need a mastermind alliance. So thank you, Ivan.
Yes, boss. Couldn't agree with you more. All right, good. So, Trevor, can you follow up on that one?
Yeah, I was just sitting here thinking it's been my dream to bump into a ghost or an alien, sort of masters of the universe that travel through various planets and get all sorts of intelligences. And I think I found my alien. His name is Tabiso. How does anyone have so much information at the age of 26? I'm sure this guy's been flying around the universe picking up all this information. I could listen to him all day. Right, so for me, MVP, I think sometimes there's a little bit of a confusion between MVP and market research. My first introduction to MVP, I think, sort of came around out of Silicon Valley, the pre-2000s, and then what started happening, and I mean, reference to Steve Jobs is very good in Apple and the development of this, technology. So from sort of the advent of the internet, sort of mid-95s through to the year 2010, probably when MVP was starting to be utilized as a product development tool in Silicon Valley companies. That's where I first started getting into it. And prior to talking about why I see it as being different to market research, I remember in the mid-70s, late 70s perhaps, a guy by the name of Paul Zane Pilzer. He floated a concept which people couldn't understand. And he turned around and said, most people, when they grow their businesses, are taught to look for a need that is not being filled and fill it. And that's how you make money. And he proposed the concept of, instead of looking for a need, why don't you create a need and then offer it out to the marketplace? So he was actually turning around and saying, create new ideas. And what MVP was allowing companies to do was to actually come up with the ideas, but not expend a huge amount of money. Use your resources, imagine a need. So you didn't have to go out there and do physical market research, which I'm hearing Lee talk about from the strawberries point of view. What you needed was a database that you could throw out an idea and see if a percentage of that database came back to you and said, right, I'm interested in this. But the only form of interest that that gives MVP any credibility is people who put their money down on it. And if they don't put their money down on it, it does not prove the MVP model. So these individuals would only work on, it doesn't matter what they say, it doesn't matter what reviews they give you, it doesn't matter all of that stuff, because at the end of the day, the vast majority of people will lie when it comes to market research. Oh, I love this. It's really great, beautiful. That strawberry is, oh, so tasty. And you go back, turn around and say, these people love it. But at the end of the day, they don't pull their money out and pay for it. And in business terms, the only product that works in MVP is the one that people actually take out money and invest in it. Now, from a technology point of view, if you've got 100,000 people in a database or 1 million people in a database, you should be floating out your idea and watching how many people actually take money out of their pocket to actually expend it on. That to me is the essence of MVP as I understand it. So let me not go much further than that. I think Ed's going to correct me.
There you go, Ed. Have you got your Tipex out? You can.
I don't need to correct Trevor, because we can all share our own ideas, can't we? I was thinking back to yesterday when I talked about writing. And when you send your manuscript up to a publisher, I'm busy collecting rejection slips at the moment. You know it's not the final version, because they're going to edit it, they're going to polish it, they're going to ask you to rewrite certain sections. But it has to be of sufficient quality so that they can see, one, you can write, and two, you can tell a story. So it has to get to a certain standard where it's going to sort of excite them and show that you can deliver perhaps more. Yeah. So that's the same, I think, with a minimal viable product. You need to reach a certain standard. It needs to have the basic functionality, but it also needs to have that promise of something more, doesn't it? That's something that's going to excite you. And it has to not damage your brand as well. I was thinking about my first, and actually some things can't have an MVP. You think about a movie, you're not going to release a sort of MVP version of Avatar and then say, oh, come back and watch the final version. So they don't have an MVP. But what they do is they actually release it first to a very small audience. And if that small audience pans it, they go back and tweak it a bit. But it's a bit too late to totally redo it, isn't it? So you kind of either can it or re-edit it. And then that reminded me of my first car, which was a Morris Marina. And it had very vague steering. And I only discovered later that when it was first shown to the press ahead of release, the press said the steering was so bad, they would totally panic if they released that car. They would destroy it in the newspapers. And they had to go back and re-engineer the steering. So people do get it wrong sometimes. So I think when you've got a minimal viable product, it mustn't damage your brand. And I think Lee's so right. People do want to give feedback, be involved. And it's like with writing, you know, people will read your draft. They call it beta reading, and they will then become your biggest fans. And I've done the same for other people. I've read some of their stuff, and you know, it's really exciting when you get the final book and you see that actually they've listened to what you've said, and then you become a big fan of theirs. Lady Lisa Jackson, I've done that for 2 of her books now, and I promote them all the time. They're travel books. They're not running books, they're travel books. And she's read mine, and she's a big fan of mine, and she's passing me email addresses of publishers that I can't actually find the email address for. So yeah, people do like to think. And then of course, a lot of companies release it as beta, saying actually this isn't the final product. This is a beta product. This is what it should look like. This is how it should work. But bear with us, it's got bits and pieces in there that don't work. And people forgive them if things don't work quite as well as it should, because they've just put beta in front, which is kind of weird. And I've seen it working in practice. During lockdown, I decided to eat really healthy. I can't be bothered to go to the shops and stuff. And it's difficult to buy healthy food where I am because it's just trash in the supermarkets. So I've been getting these recipe boxes, and one was from an established firm, and they got really nice packaging and all that sort of stuff, and branded packaging. And then there's a new vegan startup, and you can see they've kind of done the minimal viable product thing, because they've just got any old paper bags they've managed to get from somewhere. The packaging's off the shelf packaging that's probably not quite right, so you end up with a huge sort of piece of packaging for a small item, or something crammed in where it doesn't quite fit. But actually the recipes work, so you forgive the fact it's not really pretty. But if the recipes didn't work, or if there were ingredients missing, or the wrong ingredients, or the quality of the ingredients wasn't good enough, it wouldn't work. So they've got way past the finishing line with the important stuff, and they've just got the minimal viable stuff for the bits that don't matter. And I think that's the key thing, is the bit that really matters has to be right. All the fluff around it can be wrong. And I've also noticed I'm tending to turn into a Tabisho and a Lee, because they both talk expressively with their hands very much. They're very similar in that way.
Hey, we've taken a conservative, stiff upper-lipped Englishman and turned him into an expressive. There you go. I mean, this is what wisdom's is all about. So Ed, when you joined us, you were an MVP, and now you're a work in progress. So yeah, look, I think it's an interesting concept, because I think a lot of people get trapped in you know, the product's got to be perfect before we take it to the marketplace, and you get into this analysis paralysis sort of cycle that just takes you nowhere, and yeah, can be quite destructive. But on the flip side, you know, you get it wrong, it can also be quite destructive, as you said. And I just looked up a couple of things very quickly here, where people who had marketplaces got it quite wrong. So and it's quite well known. It's funny you spoke about cars, but that's the first thing sort of that came to mind. But I love the description of a vague steering. I mean, that sounds a little bit like an MVP to me. Have vague steering. But yeah, you know, just read this to you quickly, just as a matter of interest. So the first was the Ford Cougar. So the name Cougar means nothing in most languages, although Ford claims it is a derivative of the name Cougar, which is, you know, the animal, which is already used on Ford and Mercury models. However, the name Cougar in Serbian, Bosnian, Croatian, and other Balkan languages means plague, you know, as a terrible infectious disease. So you can imagine that was quite popular in those areas. The second was the Chevrolet Nova. It was a very accomplished car by General Motors. However, in Spanish-speaking countries, Nova had problems, since Nova means it doesn't go. So, yeah, got to be careful what you call. And then just the last one, well, the last one I'm going to read to you now was the Mazda La Puta. So it also had problems in Spanish-speaking customers. So the Mazda introduced a compact K car called the La Puta, which was sold mostly in Asian markets. Although Mazda claimed the name La Puta was borrowed from the book called Travels into Several Remote Nations of the World, Spanish-speaking customers understood it quite differently. In the Spanish language, La Puta is a derogative term for describing a prostitute. So I think you've got to be really careful with your MVP, especially if you're going to try and be clever with how you name it. So yeah, maybe a little bit of analysis paralysis up front would have been good for those particular models of vehicle, amongst others. Yeah, I think, I think it's been said, but I think the thing to always look at is you've got to get something into the market. So the key is to actually start, and whether you start, as Ed suggested, as the movies do, with a small focus group and a tame test. But as Trevor said, you run the risk of people blowing smoke, saying, yeah, isn't it wonderful, isn't it great, and then you put it in the market and it falls flat in its face because they weren't actually giving you a decent review, Lee. So reviews are important. Especially when you're looking at those minimum viable product kinds of things. So yeah, I think there's a fine balance between getting it out there and getting it completely wrong, and getting it out there where it's actually useful. And you do get those people who like to be beta testers, who like to be first to market, who like giving their opinions and will be honest and perhaps even blunt with you, but are prepared to walk the walk with you in terms of getting that product really going. So I think finding those kinds of groups and people to get certain kinds of products, obviously, I mean, it's not always viable to widely distribute your minimum viable product, because that's the other challenge, of course. You're wanting to put it out there with the lowest cost element that you can to get the biggest positive input back on how you actually take it to the next level, where you're going to start to really generate, so hopefully some decent revenue. So getting those mixes right, I think, is also quite important. But there you can see that comes my analytical problem, and I know Trevor's just shaking his head at me and saying, "Come on, just get it out there, do it, make it happen." So yeah. That's why you need a balance. You need the analytical in your mastermind alliance to be so. You need the analytical, you need the visionary, you need the perfectionist, and you need someone to write the story. So here you go. You've got, all four of those in your group here to be so. So away you go. And I'm not saying which one's which, but you can work it out for yourself. So, Lee.
Just wanted to add this. It was one of the fascinating stories in this book, Super Teams by Koi Tu. He tells the story of the development of Toy Story. And you reminded me of it, Edward, when you spoke about they didn't, do a minimum viable product for Avatar. Well, but as Ivan says, they did a focus group. So they had a small show of Toy Story. And of course, it was a huge experiment because this was the first animated movie through computer-generated animation. And it fell spectacularly flat. And it was so bad that they were going to can it. They weren't going to go ahead. And the head of Pixar fought. He said, give us, I think it was 2 weeks or 3 weeks, like a ridiculously short amount of time to turn this movie around. And they put themselves in basically a maelstrom of creativity and talked about the fact that now there were no sensitivities anymore. Your idea worked or it was crap, and you were told that immediately. And so, and that actually, and then of course Toy Story went on to win so many awards and was the biggest grossing movie of that year. And I mean, this, even the ongoing movies, it made Pixar. And that experience then became the culture of Pixar and how they continue to work going forward. So it was quite interesting, that concept. So I love this idea of mastermind alliance. I think that word, those two things together, mastermind alliance. Like, what? Let's talk about that tomorrow. What is that? How would you create it? What would be its value? Who would you have in your mastermind alliance? Even, that would even be fun, is like, who would be your imaginary mastermind alliance? Like, pick the 3 or 4 people in the world that would be in your mastermind alliance and why. So yeah, how's that?
That sounds good to me. So let's mastermind it, and yeah, find out who your alliance is tomorrow. Okay, good.
Nice.
Have a great day further, folks, and we will
tomorrow.
align
Bye.
with you tomorrow.